What do you get when a London-raised American South African and a New York-raised Moroccan
meet on the interwebs and become instant soul sisters? One of them, an Ayurvedic practitioner and transformation coach, and the other, a Conspire breathwork coach and Reiki master teacher. Both obsessed with wellness, family, entrepreneurship, relationships, and the magic of human expansion and growth. You get a whole convo.
We truly believe that with an open heart, focused mind, and energy receptive to the possibilities, your wellness journey can guide you to a life that exceeds your wildest dreams.
Welcome to our podcast. We're Ella and Iman, and we are so happy you're here. Come vibe with us as we explore the wholeness of being through the lens of wellness.
Welcome to a whole convo with Ella and Iman, and today we're kind of going back into time to be present here. I'll tell you what I mean. There was a song in the early 90s called Take the Weather With You by Crowded House. Do you know the song I mean?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, I shall have to play it to you. And I loved this song. And it was, it was quite early 90s. I was an age, I can't even think. It was before I was 16.
My favorite era.
And I loved this song, and it kind of stuck with me because the idea was wherever we go, whatever we're up to, we take the weather with us, whether the weather's good, whether the weather's gloomy, stormy, a whirlwind, all the things. And I play this song from time to time. And it reminded me of something that we mentioned in our very recent conversations about the farm, I believe it was, talking about the only way is through. So this is a great reminder in this song. In life, if we don't deal with ourselves, in whatever capacity that comes, we may try and change the situation, the location, we may try and change the relationships and the circumstances, but we always bring the weather with us. We always take ourselves wherever we go. So we might get light relief for a little while and then it comes back. Those themes are the themes, right?
I love getting frilly with you, Ella. My favorite. I love this topic. Ella. This is going to be a great one. As I'm hearing you speak, the first thing that comes to my mind in the words you're using is basically like I always come back to the connection of Ayurveda and also what I've been learning the past few years. And it's always like the root of things, right? The root cause. We always look at the causative factors of something. For something to manifest and be and exist, there's a root to it. And I think oftentimes when we think, like you said, we're not processing something or we're not really addressing something, we're not integrating it in a very conscious, intentional way for us to actually evolve and improve, then it's just kind of like dancing with us always, right? Like you said, you're putting it like the weather is there. We're just dragging it with us always. So I'm ready to dive in. I'm ready to dive into this one. This is going to be a good topic.
It's Ayurveda has its root cause as the explanation. I love it. And when we look at it in terms of our breath and in terms of our energy, there is always a way that it manifests itself and reveals itself if we don't pay attention. I love that. It's the being conscious and being intentional with working with something, which is so significant, because if we try to understand things, now let me rewind, because we have layers of our experience as human beings, and we also have layers of how we work through things that are with us from our past. And sometimes if we get an understanding, it's easy to believe, okay, I understand why a certain relationship has affected me. I understand the dynamics of that relationship. And the understanding is like the first step. I can see it. I can start adding up the pieces and building the knowledge around why I may find it difficult to do things. So let me put this into an example. Let's say I have a challenging relationship with someone who's significant in my life growing up. And this might be a parent, a caregiver, or someone in close proximity. And there is something that this person keeps reinforcing to me in our interactions. So it may be that they promise to do something and they always go back on their promise. So then I have this understanding that people who promise things are not actually going to see through. So it creates trust issues. It creates a challenge in creating that bond in relationship. And then from there, life happens, you grow up and whatever, and you think you move past that situation because you've left that relationship behind, or you have become more equal in that relationship. And then I start noticing, actually, I find it really hard to trust people. I find it really difficult to believe what someone says to me, and I can't figure out why. So I decide to go look a bit deeper. And then in looking a bit deeper, I attribute it to that first relationship. And that's my first layer of understanding. The understanding doesn't automatically mean I'm going to find it easier to trust people. There is more work to be done. There are deeper layers to work through, to integrate, to heal in order to start establishing trust with other people. So if you were to talk me through like an Ayurveda perspective on this, how do you think this kind of thing would manifest in affecting our energy, our doshas?
There's a few things that I want to address. So when there's an occurrence or a happening in our life, right, that's very directly related to a specific event or a specific person, our human nature naturally wants to connect that specific person and that specific event that this is the truth. So you mentioned an example of someone letting you down or breaking their promise. And so that basically expresses itself and you may be having difficulty trusting people because life has so far shown you that you can't trust someone. What we decide to do with it is what dictates how we move forward. So for me, whether it's Ayurveda or something else, the important thing you said is you decided to do the work on it. And so in Ayurveda, there's a thing called budi, and that inner intelligence has to guide you in a certain way. A lot of the top layer things, the superficial layers of our human nature, some people may call it ego, but I don't even demonize ego because even ego has its role and its purpose.
Agree.
I don't think
Agree.
of ego as a negative thing. So, but the inner intelligence is what I am most connected with and what I try to tap into to actually start asking myself, my inner self, what is the reality and what's the truth here? I cannot judge every single event and every single person on this one predicament. That is a mistake of the intellect if I do that. And in Ayurveda, mistake of the intellect can lead to poor choices. So the mistake of the intellect leads us to maybe eating the wrong food, right? Picking something that does not benefit our cellular function, or it could also be choosing a certain life, a certain mindset that doesn't serve us. So when we look at the mistake of the intellect and the inner intelligence, and we really make a conscious effort to work with those attributes of our being, that is when we can see progress. We can see us changing the narrative of our own life.
And it's a beautiful explanation, the reminder that we have a choice once we decipher these things. And I guess for me, part of the reason that I love the idea of being present and being tuned into what we are experiencing in our lives on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to being on autopilot and not really questioning what's happening, is that it opens up the gap to remember that there is another way of experiencing life. There are other choices that we can make that are not always dictated in reactivity. So going back, it's like noticing and seeing these things and being aware of, actually, in the trust example, I feel as though I can't trust other people, but what am I bringing into this feeling? What am I contributing to noticing this, to feeling like I experience this with every single person I meet? And then if I'm to look at this from a breath perspective, which is why I love the word integration in terms of breath, our understanding and intellectual. So what did you call it? You called it mistake of the intellect. So that mistaken thinking, I mean, there's whole convos on that.
Yeah,
That
totally.
mistaken thinking of a protective mind, which is trying to keep us safe. I am worried that this person is going to let you down. Therefore, I'm trying to draw you towards not trusting them because that's what I believe is the safest thing. And then creating that pause, that remembering it doesn't have to be this way. This is a new person, this is a new situation, there are new opportunities and new choices available. And then when we read that in our breath, that will show up as places where the breath is restricted. There's not a free flow of movement. And the free flow of movement is essentially the free flow of life force energy, that free flow of affirming, giving, taking up space, abundance of experience. And then by opening up those spaces, we stop being drawn into that belief. We stop being drawn into that fear that shows up in those protective ideas. And that happens because we are able to integrate the emotions. So for me, it comes in, we have these thoughts and these the understanding on a thought and intellectual level, and then underneath that there are emotions that are driving those thoughts, that keep reaffirming those thoughts. So when we can tap into those emotions and integrate them, because essentially that thought is driven by an emotion stuck in time.
Yeah.
I don't feel safe. I don't feel heard. I
Yeah.
don't feel respected. And all of the emotions that feed into that idea. And so being able to integrate that then opens this beautiful space where if you imagine that the past creates glasses and those glasses are a filter through which we see life. So if I don't trust, it has a certain shape, and if I don't have self-worth, it has a certain shape, and we superimpose that onto life. So there's life as it's happening, and then what we're seeing, which is the weather, going right back to the beginning. And by making those, creating that integration through working with our breath, through looking at the
Inner
inner
intelligence.
intelligence, connecting to that inner intelligence. And then, the Reiki energy also offers us a perspective of bringing that harmony, creating that space of homeostasis internally
Mhm.
in all the ways that things are flowing through us. That's when the weather is no longer being dragged along with us unconsciously, but then we start to create these spaces where we do things differently.
Yeah, beautifully said, Ella. I love that you mentioned a few modalities, 100% first and foremost breath, right? Because we've even had past episodes, of course, where we dove a little bit deeper on your work and conspire breath work and just breath work in general, how we always forget that it's actually a tool just because it's involuntary and it's something like, look at me, I'm sitting here, I'm breathing, I'm good, right? But I love that you spoke of that and mentioned other modalities and Reiki. And this is one thing that I'm really, really so strong on and have so much conviction, especially now after my experience living on a farm, is that I think as people walking this, green earth on this 3D dimension, there's so much out there for us. There are so many tools and there are so many modalities. And I think the first step in us just wanting to explore some of them, a few of them, or all of them, is that acknowledgement of, hey, I'm feeling something. There's something that I am clinging to. And that
Mm,
acknowledgement and then the understanding, like you mentioned, and just being so compassionate with yourself and being happy that you're aware, just having that first
absolutely.
step of awareness and then deciding, then how do I want to tackle this? And
Mm,
giving yourself the space. You spoke a lot about space. And even with breath work, like in Ayurveda, we talk a lot about it as far as like, the prana, right? The life force. And in traditional Chinese medicine, qi, but those channels within our being, figuratively and physically and physiologically, there has to be a free flow happening in order for us to actually feel that homeostasis, feel that peace, really feel vital. And when those channels are blocked, we're not working with our breath, we're not using other modalities, we're not putting into practice the things that serve us for our vitality, then
Mm,
that blockage is what doesn't allow us to integrate. That blockage is what keeps that tension in our body. And so,
mhm,
just like you mentioned and had that beautiful analogy of the weather is just going with us, it's almost like we're also crystallizing some event or some person or some experience that how whatever happened and however it happened hurt us, caused the
mm,
pain. We decide to crystallize it.
mhm,
Imagine it like a little rock inside our body. It lives there. And now it's just this crystal in our body that we haven't, smoothed out. We haven't like nurtured so that there is that flow. There is that prana life force moving through us to help us evolve. So yeah, I think there's so many aspects to us taking responsibility and ownership, but I think having the compassion to say, you know what? There is an experience, there is an event, there is a person that actually still impacts me. So maybe
mm.
just an invitation to our listeners, maybe asking, is there an event or experience that you think and truly authentically feel still impacts you today, that you haven't addressed, that you haven't given the love and nurture to smooth it out with whatever modalities that you want to discover so that you can move forward?
Very well said, Iman. And I'd like to add that sometimes we don't recognize how things have impacted us
Oh my God,
because,
100%.
especially when we talk about the idea of, I mean, neither of us have specifically used the word trauma here, but it's understanding that trauma is not something that necessarily has to be big or something that has to feel like it's worthy of that title.
Right.
It seems that sometimes there's been a misunderstanding that even the smallest things can impact us and have traumatic significance, even though as an adult, maybe looking back, we can explain that or we can understand what was going on. We have to remember that we were looking at things through a younger version of ourselves. And that younger version of ourselves may not have had the capacity to rationalize it or understand it in that same way, which is why it causes that crystallizing event and keeps having things added on top
Right.
until, like that crystal. I mean, it's nice. I'm holding a crystal here. It could look beautiful like this. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
And that's what we then experience in the here and now as adults.
Yeah, it's like
And
a mountain of emotions that have not been processed.
huge.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. All coming from what, looking back, may not seem that significance. So I'd like to offer that reminder as well that it doesn't necessarily have to be something that seems now as an adult that big of a deal, but as to your child self or to your younger self, that younger expression of you could have been life altering at that time. And you talking about the crystallizing, such a beautiful way to express it. And how wonderful that we have these ancient, because they're often rooted in ancient awareness,
Yes.
things as old as time, that we are mind, body, and spirit. Mind, body, emotions, and energy, if we want to really elaborate and express it. Because this idea may get lost in some of the modern approaches to dealing with things that affect us in our lives. There is a lot of talk and a greater understanding about mental health, but that's only part of the picture. There is also the emotional aspect, and how that emotional and mental aspect ties into the physical manifestation, the energetic impact. So that's the beauty of having the richness of so many wise, perfectly formed traditions, teachings that offer us the breadth of the understanding that the weather starts here.
Yes.
Like if we think about it, it starts from the heavens and it trickles down and we experience it on earth. And what a perfect way to imagine that impact on us. It starts up here in the mind and our understanding, and it trickles down into our physical, grounded or not so grounded experience until we make those conscious choices to compassionately, kindly, lovingly address and be with all aspects of our weather, all aspects of ourselves, so that whether we are in New York, whether we are in Hartford, whether we take ourselves to the depths of Australia, the weather that we carry with us, regardless of what's going on outside, feels a little more enjoyable from the inside out.
Absolute perfection. What a way to end this. I love that. And just to actually add on a little, that's why integrated thought and processed emotions is what helps us create wholeness. Because it's not about leaving those things behind or trying to forget them or trying to
Yeah.
demonize them. It's bringing them in with us. It's integrating them and processing them so that we can actually feel whole.
Feel whole, feel magic, feel beautiful, feel all of the things.
I love it. I really want to hear from our listeners on some of the ways they tackle integrating their thoughts, their emotions, what modalities work for them, why this is an important topic for them as well. I know you'd love to hear from them too, Ella.
I would, and even I'd love to hear from people who maybe they haven't looked at it this way. Maybe it's a new idea that actually there's more to it than just understanding where. No, let me remove just because it's not a just.
Right.
There's more to it than understanding only on an intellectual level. There's more to be explored. There's
Wow.
more space for healing to take place. And I guess maybe that's what I mean when I think of healing, looking at the whole picture and the parts that go deeper than starting and finishing at understanding.
Yes, I love that you brought that up because 100% I agree. This is not about just, oh yeah, well, just start integrating. Just start integrating people and start processing your emotions. This is not a verbal, like you said, a just thing. There's been some real agony in my life trying to process certain things. It's hard work, and sometimes you have to try so many different things and explore so many different ways. That's why we brought up the modalities, embracing and having compassion for yourself and what you're going through, and then maybe asking what's the best route for you, because everybody's different.
Absolutely. And I just want to say this because that's what helped me understand, because I spent so long intellectually processing and intellectualizing my past, which
Mm.
was fantastic. And then I kept noticing that I would butt into things and I couldn't move forward, and I'd get activated and triggered by things that I thought I understood, but they were still so real emotionally for me. They were still so real energetically and had that physical charge in my body. And it wasn't until I was able to reach it there that the weather started to change.
Okay, girl, I love it. Ending on that note, oh, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. For those watching us on our YouTube channel, thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for being here. Until next time.
That is a wrap on this week's Convo. We had a blast talking to you.
Thank you for sharing your time, hearts, and minds with us.
We hope this episode left you thinking, feeling, and maybe even breathing a little deeper. If it moved something in you, please share it, text it to a friend, or just sit with it.
Remember, the power of change can start with the simplest convo.
And if you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share with us, please feel free to do so. We'd love to connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to our show so you never miss a moment of the magic. And if you're curious about any of our services and offerings, check out the show notes for all the links and goodies. We're so grateful you're on this journey with us. Until next time,
Stay rooted, stay whole.